Welcome, dear listener, to another tale from the tranquil village of St. Mary Mead. Pull your armchair closer, pour a cup of Earl Grey, and let the snow outside your window match the drifts that blanket our story. Tonight, Miss Jane Marple, knitting needles clicking, eyes bright as winter stars, unravels a theft so clever it might have baffled Scotland Yard. Settle in. The fate is about to begin. Chapter 1. The Diamond Vanishes, St. Mary Mead, December 1947. The war had been over for 2 years, yet rationing still pinched like an ill-fitting corset, and the village wore its post-war grayness with the same dogged cheer it had shown through the Blitz. Coal was scarce, butter scarcer. But Christmas spirit, that was ration-free. For 3 days the snow had fallen without cease, thick, deliberate flakes that settled on thatched roofs like icing on a plum cake, sealed the lanes and turned the high street into a ribbon of white velvet. No motor cars disturbed it, only the occasional crunch of galoshes or the muffled clop of the milkman's pony. At the heart of the village stood the village hall, Georgian brick gone soft with age, its windows glowing amber against the dusk. Tonight it hosted the Christmas fete, an institution older than the wireless, older than the motor car, older than most of the inhabitants themselves. The Women's Institute had commandeered every trestle table in the parish. The brownies had strung paper chains until their fingers turned the color of holly berries. The church choir had rehearsed carols until Mr. Swetnam's organ wheezed like an asthmatic walrus. And at the center of it all, upon the little stage beneath a banner reading "Peace on Earth, Goodwill to St. Mary Mead," rested the evening's crowning glory, the St. Mary Mead diamond. It was not strictly speaking of St. Mary Mead. The stone belonged to Lady Cheveley of Gossington Hall, who had inherited it from an uncle who had made his fortune in South African mines and lost most of it in Monte Carlo. 42 carats, flawless, the color of winter moonlight on water. Lady Cheveley had lent it for one night only, to raise funds for the new nursery, she said, though everyone knew she relished the gasps it provoked. The diamond sat in a glass case no larger than a hat box, upon a pedestal draped in crimson velvet. The case was secured by a Yale lock of the latest pattern. Inspector Craddock himself had tested it that morning and pronounced it burglar-proof, short of dynamite. A notice in Mrs. Bantry's best copperplate warned, "Do not touch," by order of the W.I. By 7 o'clock the hall was abuzz. The scent of beeswax polish mingled with cinnamon from the W.I.'s famous mince pies, and the band, 3 violins, a cello, and Mr. Polk on the double bass, sawed valiantly through "In the Bleak Midwinter." Children darted between skirts like minnows. Old Colonel Bantry dozed in a corner beneath a sprig of mistletoe. The vicar, Reverend Leonard Clement, circulated with a collecting tin shaped like a miniature Spitfire. Miss Jane Marple arrived precisely at 7:15, as was her habit. She wore her winter coat of dove-gray wool, a knitted scarf the color of damson jam, and carried a small wicker basket containing 2 scarves she intended to raffle for the Red Cross. She paused in the doorway to shake snow from her galoshes, then surveyed the room with the mild, slightly myopic gaze that deceived so many into thinking her merely a charming old lady who liked knitting and gossip. In truth, her eyes missed nothing. The way Mrs. Price's left glove was inside out, betraying hurried dressing. The tremor in Captain Haynes's hand as he accepted a cup of tea, the faint smear of crimson lipstick on the rim of Miss Felicity Price's cup, too bright for a schoolmistress's salary. "Ah, Miss Marple," Mrs. Bantry bore down upon her like a frigate under full sail. "You're just in time. Lady Cheveley arrives at 8 to unveil the diamond properly. We're to have photographs. The Gazette is sending Mr. Stringer. Do say you'll sit on the front row." Miss Marple smiled. "I should be delighted, Dolly, though I fear my old eyes won't discern much beyond a sparkle." "Nonsense. You see more than any of us." Mrs. Bantry lowered her voice. "Between ourselves, I shan't rest until the thing is back in Lady Cheveley's safe. I've had nightmares of masked bandits." "Masked bandits rarely trouble themselves with village fates," Miss Marple murmured. "They prefer London banks. Still, one cannot be too careful." She accepted a cup of tea, weak, 1 sugar, and took her seat in the front row, third from the aisle. From here she had an unobstructed view of the stage. The glass case glinted beneath the fairy lights. The diamond within seemed to pulse with its own cold fire. Around it, the suspects to be drifted like planets in uneasy orbit. Captain Reginald Haynes leaned against the proscenium arch, lighting a cigarette with a hand that trembled just enough to betray last night's whiskey. XRAF, decorated for gallantry over Malta, now reduced to breeding chickens that refused to lay in winter. His dress uniform had been sold. Tonight he wore a dinner jacket shiny at the elbows. Miss Felicity Price, the schoolmistress, arranged her display of children's paintings with unnecessary precision. Her evening gown, emerald silk, daringly low for St. Mary Mead, was clearly hired. The hem still bore the faint crease of the box. Mr. Albert Swettenham, the organist, fussed with sheet music, his pince-nez flashing. A bachelor of uncertain age, he lived with his mother and was rumored to supplement his stipend by selling church silver through a contact in Birmingham. Mrs. Dora Blackett, postmistress and fount of all village intelligence, presided over the raffle tickets. Her nephew Sidney, known as Slippery Sid since his last sojourn at His Majesty's Pleasure, had arrived by the afternoon bus and was nowhere to be seen. And Tommy Pierce, 14, choir boy, kite flyer extraordinaire, darted past with a tray of sausage rolls, his freckled face alight with the importance of being trusted near the grown-ups' mysteries. At 7:45, the band struck up "God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen." The hall was now packed, every chair taken, latecomers standing 3 deep at the back. The air was thick with wool and perfume and the faint metallic tang of excitement. Lady Cheveley arrived at 7:58, sweeping in on a cloud of Russian sable and Chanel No. 5. She was 60 if she was a day, but carried it like a woman who had never heard the word no. Behind her came her maid, Higgs, carrying a leather jewel case the size of a small suitcase. Mrs. Bantry bustled forward. "Lady Cheveley, such an honor." Yes, let's get on with it," Lady Cheveley said briskly. "The photographer's waiting and I've a dinner engagement in town tomorrow." The crowd parted. Lady Cheveley ascended the 3 steps to the stage, Mrs. Bantry fluttering behind with the key on a crimson ribbon. The band ceased mid-carol. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of the gas lamps and the soft thud of snow against the windows. Mrs. Bantry inserted the key, turned it, the lock clicked. She lifted the glass lid. The velvet cushion was bare. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Lady Cheveley's voice cracked like a whip. "Where is my diamond?" A collective gasp rippled outward. Children were shushed. Old Mrs. Harmon dropped her knitting. Captain Haynes's cigarette fell unnoticed onto the polished floor. Mrs. Bantry stared into the empty case as though it were a magician's trick gone wrong. "But I locked it myself at 6 o'clock. Inspector Craddock watched me." Inspector Craddock, on leave, but unable to resist the lure of free mince pies, pushed through the crowd. He was a tall man with a mustache like a well-trained terrier. "Stand back, please. No one touch anything." He examined the case. The lock was intact, the glass unblemished. The crimson velvet bore only the faint circular depression where the diamond had rested. No scratches, no smudges, no sign of force. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thick and silent. Constable Polk was summoned to check the stage door. It was bolted from the inside, a heavy iron bolt 4 feet above the drift. No footprints marred the snow beneath the window. The drift there rose unbroken to the sill. Miss Marple had not moved from her seat. She studied the empty cushion with the same gentle curiosity she might bestow upon a dropped stitch. Then her gaze traveled downward to the brass keyhole. A scratch. No, a series of scratches, fine as spider silk, circling the keyhole like the rings of a miniature tree. And caught in the brass, almost invisible, a single filament no thicker than a hair. Red. Silk. She leaned closer. The filament quivered in the draft from the door, then snapped free and drifted to the floor like a drop of blood. Tommy Pierce, passing with an empty tray, saw her staring. "Summat wrong, Miss Marple." Miss Marple smiled serenely. "Only a puzzle, Tommy. Tell me, did you fly your kite today? Before the snow got bad, miss, near the hall. Wind took it right over the roof." "Ah," said Miss Marple. "Over the roof. How very enterprising." Lady Cheveley was now in full cry. "I'll have the police. I'll have Scotland Yard. That diamond is worth £20,000. Inspector Craddock raised a placatory hand. "Now, your ladyship, let's not be hasty. The hall's been full of people all evening. Someone must have seen something." But no one had. The case had been in full view since 6 o'clock. The last person to touch it, apart from Mrs. Bantry, had been Mr. Swetnam, who had adjusted the spotlight at 7:30. He swore he had seen the diamond then, winking like the Koh-i-Noor. Miss Marple rose, smoothing her skirt. "Inspector, might I suggest we close the doors? The snow is drifting in, and we must preserve any traces." Craddock looked at her with the mixture of exasperation and respect she invariably provoked. "Very well, Miss Marple. Polk, lock the front doors. No one leaves until we've taken statements." A murmur of protest rose. Children began to whine. Outside, the church clock struck 8. The band, uncertain whether to play or not, launched into a ragged, silent night. Miss Marple returned to her seat. In her lap, her knitting needles began to click, steady, methodical, the sound of a brain turning over possibilities like soil in spring. A theft without violence, a locked case unforced, snow untouched, and a single red thread. Somewhere in the hall a clock ticked. Outside, the snow fell thicker than ever, erasing the world. Chapter 2. 5 faces in the firelight. The village hall had become a snowbound courtroom. By 9 o'clock, the gas lamps had been turned low to save fuel, and the fairy lights above the stage flickered like nervous stars. The band had packed away their instruments. The mince pies lay abandoned beneath damp napkins. The children, sent home with hastily wrapped parcels of sweets, left echoes of their protests in the rafters. Inspector Craddock stood upon the stage, hands clasped behind his back, the empty glass case at his elbow like a silent accuser. Constable Palk, red-nosed, earnest, guarded the front doors with the solemnity of a beefeater. A single coal fire burned in the grate, throwing long shadows that danced across the faces of the 5 souls who had been nearest the diamond when it vanished. Miss Marple sat in the front row, third from the aisle, her knitting untouched in her lap. She had not moved since the discovery, save to retrieve the red filament from the floor and wind it carefully around her little finger. It lay there now, a scarlet thread against pale skin, glinting whenever the firelight caught it. Inspector Craddock cleared his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, though I use the term loosely under the circumstances, no one will leave this hall until we have answers. The snow has sealed every road. The telephone lines are down. We are for tonight an island. I require the presence of 5 individuals who were within arm's reach of the display case between 7:30 and 8:17 precisely. Step forward, please." A rustle, a cough, then one by one they came. He moved with the stiff swagger of a man who had once looped the loop over Valletta but now feared the bailiff more than Flack. His dinner jacket, once midnight blue, had faded to the color of dishwater. The elbows shone like polished pewter. He lit a fresh cigarette from the stub of the last, inhaled deeply, and regarded Craddock with the weary insolence of the fallen officer class. Craddock, name and occupation, sir. Haynes, exhaling smoke towards the ceiling. Captain Reginald Haynes, late of His Majesty's Royal Air Force. Currently battling between engagements. I breed poultry. A snigger from the back, swiftly stifled. Craddock, you were observed leaning against the stage pillar at 7:45. Did you touch the case? Haynes, good Lord, no. I was admiring the blasted thing, not pinching it. Though between ourselves, old boy, I could use the cash. Miss Marple's needles remained still. She noted the tremor in his left hand. Nicotine, whiskey, or guilt, and the way his eyes flicked to the side exit whenever Lady Cheveley's voice rose in pitch. The schoolmistress glided forward as though on casters, her emerald silk gown whispering secrets to the floorboards. She was 32, unmarried, and wore her spinsterhood like a badge of defiance. Her auburn hair was pinned in victory rolls that had begun to droop. A single sequin, diamond-shaped, clung to the hem of her shawl like a tear. Craddock, you arranged the children's paintings directly beneath the stage from 7:15 onward? Felicity, voice clear, rehearsed. I did. The children were proud of their nativity scenes. I adjusted the spotlight at 7:30 at Mr. Swetnam's request. The diamond was there then, winking most insolently. Her glance slid to Captain Haynes, lingered a fraction too long, then away. Miss Marple caught it. A flicker of complicity or fear. The organist shuffled forward, sheet music clutched to his chest like a hymnal. His pince-nez flashed. His Adam's apple bobbed above a wing collar yellowed with age. He smelled faintly of coal tar soap and the camphor his mother used to moth-proof his suits. Craddock, you claim to have been in the choir loft from 7:50 until the alarm. Swetnam, prim. Precisely. I played the introduction to Once in Royal David City at 7:52. The choir will corroborate. I descended only when Mrs. Bantry screamed. He adjusted his glasses, peering at the empty case as though it had personally offended him. Miss Marple noted the dust on his shoes, gray, ecclesiastical, and the single sequin caught in the turn-up of his left trouser, identical to Felicity's. The postmistress marched forward with the authority of one who had sorted the village's secrets for 30 years. Her bun was tight as a drum. Her spectacles glinted like warning beacons. Craddock, your nephew, Sidney Blackett, arrived by the 4:30 bus. Where is he now? Mrs. Blackett, brisk. Sidney? Gone to Birmingham on the 6:15, urgent business. Craddock, the 6:15 was cancelled, snow. No bus has left St. Mary Mead since noon. A pause. Mrs. Blackett's lips thinned. Then he must be at the Blue Boar. Boys will drink. Miss Marple's gaze traveled to Mrs. Blackett's handbag, black mock crocodile bulging at the seams. A corner of red silk protruded no larger than a matchbook. The choir boy was pushed forward by his mother, who hovered anxiously at the edge of the circle. Tommy's freckles stood out like cinnamon on milk. His knees knocked beneath his gray shorts. Craddock, you were seen near the stage at 7:40 with a tray of sausage rolls. Did you touch the case? Tommy, voice cracking. No, sir. I mean, only to put the tray on the table. The diamond was there, honest, sparkly as anything. His eyes darted to the side exit, then to Captain Haynes, then to the floor. Miss Marple saw the kite string, scarlet waxed, peeking from his pocket like a guilty tongue. Craddock addressed the hall. These 5 were within 3 yards of the case during the critical half-hour. The lock was intact, the glass unbroken, the snow outside undisturbed. Yet the diamond is gone. I will interview each of you separately. The rest remain seated. A low murmur rose, like bees in a skep. Lady Cheveley, enthroned in the mayor's chair, fanned herself with a program. £20,000. My late husband's uncle would turn in his grave. Miss Marple rose quietly and approached the stage. She moved with the unhurried grace of one who has all the time in the world and intends to use it. Craddock, sotto voce. Miss Marple, this is police business. Miss Marple mildly. Of course, Inspector, but the fire is dying and Mrs. Paulk's rheumatism will suffer. Might I add a scoop of coal? One learns so much from the way people warm their hands. Craddock sighed. Very well, but no questions. Miss Marple knelt by the grate, selected a lump of coal with care and placed it atop the embers. As she did so, she angled her body to shield her actions from the room. With her free hand, she lifted the red filament from her finger and held it above the flames. It curled, blackened, vanished. She straightened. There. That should keep us cozy. Captain Haynes was first for interview. He followed Craddock behind the makeshift screen of stacked chairs. Miss Marple resumed her seat, took up her knitting, and listened. Haynes, voice muffled. Yes, debts. The chickens won't lay, the foxes won't pay rent. But I'm no thief, Craddock. I'd have taken the whole case and pawned it in Soho, not left it for the next chap. A pause. The scratch of Craddock's pencil. Haynes. Besides, I was watching Felicity. She's been distracted. Letters from London. A man, I shouldn't wonder. Miss Marple's needles clicked. Click, 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 like a metronome counting lies. Felicity Price was next. Her voice trembled only once. Felicity. I have no need of diamonds. My fiancé, well, he's not free yet, but when he is... Craddock. Name? Felicity. That's private. A silence. Then the rustle of silk as she was dismissed. Mr. Swetnam's interview was a masterpiece of evasion. He spoke of stop knobs and pedal couplers, of the exact second he had depressed the swell pedal. Miss Marple timed his monologue against her watch. 6 minutes, 43 seconds. The carol lasted 6 minutes. 11 minutes unaccounted for. Mrs. Blackett denied everything with the calm of one who had faced down post office queues for decades. Sidney's no angel, but he's no magician. He can't walk through locked doors. Tommy Pierce last dissolved into tears. I only wanted to see it close, sir. It looked like a star. I never touched it, I swear on me, Mum. Craddock emerged, harassed. Nothing. Not a fingerprint, not a footprint, not a whisper. It's as though the diamond dissolved. Miss Marple laid her knitting aside. May I see the case again, Inspector? Craddock hesitated, then nodded. She mounted the stage, opened her handbag, and produced a small magnifying lens, no larger than a sixpence, but powerful. She bent over the keyhole. The scratches were finer than she had thought. A spiral, almost musical, as though a thread had been drawn through again and again. And caught in the brass, another filament, shorter but unmistakably the same scarlet silk. She straightened. Inspector, might I borrow Tommy's kite string? For comparison. Tommy summoned, produced the reel with reluctance. The string was waxed, strong, the color of arterial blood. Miss Marple. And Captain Haynes, your scarf, if you please. Haynes unwound the silk scarf from his neck with poor grace. It was identical in shade and weave to the kite string. Miss Marple, softly. Curious. 3 sources of the same silk, yet only 1 diamond. Lady Cheveley erupted. This is intolerable. I shall telegraph the yard at first light. Craddock. With respect, your ladyship, the lines are down. We are on our own. The fire settled with a sigh. Outside, the wind moaned around the eaves like a lost soul. Miss Marple returned to her seat. In her lap, the booty grew. 1 row pearl, 1 row plain. She spoke to no one in particular. Human nature is like snow, Inspector. It covers everything evenly, until something underneath disturbs it. Then the shape beneath is revealed. Craddock looked at her sharply. You have a theory? Miss Marple. Only an observation. The diamond did not walk away. Something drew it, and whatever drew it left a trail no heavier than a spider's web. She held up the scarlet filament between thumb and forefinger. It caught the firelight, glowed, and was gone, slipped into her handbag with the neatness of a conjurer. The 5 suspects watched her, each face a study. Haynes defiant, Felicity frightened, Swetnam calculating, Mrs. Blackett stony, Tommy tear-stained. Somewhere in the hall, a clock chimed the quarter. The snow continued to fall, thick and silent, erasing the world beyond the windows. Chapter 3. Footprints that weren't. Dawn crept over St. Mary Mead like a guilty secret, pale and reluctant. The snow had ceased some time after 3, leaving the village muffled in a hush so complete that the church clock's single chime at 6 sounded like a gunshot. The village hall stood sentinel in the half-light, its windows blind with frost, the Union Jack above the door hanging limp and iced. Inside, the air was thick with yesterday's coal smoke and the sour breath of too many people confined too long. The 5 suspects had been allowed to sleep on pew cushions in the vestry under Constable Paulk's watchful eye, while Inspector Craddock cat-napped in the mayor's chair. Miss Marple alone had remained in the hall proper, dozing upright in her seat, knitting needles crossed over her heart like a knight's sword. At 6:30, the sky turned the color of skimmed milk. Craddock roused himself, stamped feeling into his feet, and summoned Paulk. Craddock, voice hoarse. Round search, every inch. And open the stage door. Let some air in before we all suffocate. Paulk fumbled with the iron bolt. It slid back with a screech that set teeth on edge. The door opened onto a wall of snow 4 feet high, sculpted by the wind into a perfect unbroken wave. Beyond it, the churchyard lay virgin white. Not a track, not a hollow, not even the delicate print of a robin. Miss Marple, without opening her eyes. No footprints, Inspector. As expected. Craddock swore under his breath. Then how the devil, Miss Marple? Precisely, how is the question, the who will follow. She rose, joints creaking softly, and descended the aisle with the measured tread of one who has all day and intends to use every minute. Her galoshes left damp crescents on the parquet. At the stage door she paused, produced her lens, and studied the snowdrift. The drift rose flush with the sill. The door itself, solid oak, wartime paint flaking, showed no scrape marks, no disturbance of the frost on the inside. The bolt, when she tested it, sat exactly 4 feet above the floor. A child could not have reached it without standing on something. An adult would have left a hollow in the snow. She closed the door, rebolted it, and turned to the keyhole of the display case. In daylight, the scratches were clearer, a delicate spiral as though a gimlet had danced there. The brass was bright where the thread had rubbed, dull elsewhere. Craddock, joining her. Anything, Miss Marple? A great deal. The thread was drawn through at least thrice. See the overlapping grooves? And here, she indicated a fleck of crimson wax caught in the escutcheon, the same compound Tommy uses to stiffen his kite string. Curious. Tommy Pierce, summoned from the vestry, hovered in the doorway clutching a mug of cocoa. His eyes were red-rimmed, his knees still knocked. Tommy. I never miss, honest. Me strings in me pocket. Miss Marple, gently. Show me, dear. He produced the reel. Half the string was gone. The cut end was fresh, the wax still tacky. Craddock. When did you last fly it? Tommy. Yesterday morning before the snow got bad. Wind took it right over the hall roof. Snagged on the gutter, it did. I had to climb the drain pipe to fetch it down. Miss Marple's eyes traveled to the high windows above the stage. One pane, she noted, was slightly ajar, warped by damp perhaps, or deliberately loosened. A kite flown from the churchyard could have passed through that gap, trailing its string like a fishing line. She said nothing aloud, Instead, she asked Tommy to accompany her outside. The churchyard was a study in white geometry. The yew trees wore mantles of snow. The war memorial stood like a sugar loaf. Tommy pointed to the drain pipe at the hall's northeast corner. Tommy. Up there, miss, see the scrape? That's where me shoe slipped. Indeed, a faint abrasion marred the lead, and caught in the gutter above, 20 feet up, invisible from the ground, fluttered a scrap of red silk no larger than a postage stamp. Craddock followed her gaze. Polk, ladder! While the constable fetched the library steps, Miss Marple circumnavigated the hall. The snow here was deeper, drifted against the wall in a smooth incline. She knelt, brushed the surface with gloved fingers, and revealed a shallow groove, no wider than a finger, running from the base of the drain pipe to the stage door. It was filled with wind-blown snow, but the shape was unmistakable, the path of a kite string dragged across the drift. She straightened. The thief never entered the hall, Inspector. The hall came to him. Back inside, the search continued. Craddock's men, 2 local bobbies borrowed from Much Benham, combed the vestibule, the cloakroom, the brownie's cupboard. They found Miss Marple pocketed the sequin without comment. At 8 o'clock, the suspects were assembled in the vestry for breakfast, tea, margarine on toast, and the last of the W.I.'s rock cakes. The atmosphere was brittle. Captain Haynes smoked incessantly. Felicity Price shredded her paper napkin into lace. Mr. Swetnam polished his pince-nez until the lenses squeaked. Mrs. Blackett stared into her tea as though reading omens. Tommy Pierce swung his legs and avoided everyone's eyes. Craddock addressed them. New evidence? A kite string was used, possibly flown through the high window. The reel is half empty. The silk matches fragments found at the scene. Pierce. Where were you at 7:50? Tommy, voice cracking. With me mum, sir. Helping serve. Ask anyone. Mrs. Pierce, summoned from the kitchen, confirmed it tearfully. Craddock turned to Haynes. Your scarf, Captain, same silk. Haynes. Borrowed it from the RAF club, dozens like it. Swetnam, primly. I observed no kite. I was at the organ. Felicity. Nor I, though. She hesitated. Albert did ask me to lend him my shawl at 7:40, said the loft was cold. Swetnam flushed crimson. For my hands, the petals are brass, freeze the blood. Miss Marple listened, head cocked like a robin. She noted the sequin dust on Swetnam's cuffs, identical to Felicity's shawl. She noted, too, the faint groove on the vestry windowsill, as though a string had been drawn across it. At 9, the verger, Mr. Clement, a stooped man with a face like a worried sheep, arrived to unlock the church. He paused in the doorway, snow dripping from his boots. Clement. Begging your pardon, Inspector, there's some odd in the churchyard. Footprints, but only half footprints. Like someone walked on stilts. Craddock strode out, Miss Marple at his heels. The footprints began at the lich gate and ended at the hall's side wall. They were shallow, oval, spaced 3 feet apart, exactly the length of a kite reel held at arm's height. The snow between them was smooth, but beneath the surface lay the faint ridge of the string. Miss Marple. The thief flew the kite from the churchyard, threaded the string through the window, and drew the diamond out on a slide of cardboard. The bolt was shot from inside, by an accomplice perhaps, or by the string itself looped around it. Craddock. But the bolt is 4 feet up. Miss Marple. A child on an adult's shoulders could reach it, or a weighted loop tossed over. She demonstrated with Tommy's remaining string, flicking her wrist. The loop sailed upward, caught the bolt, and slid it back with a click. The suspects watched from the doorway, faces pale in the cold light. Back in the hall, Miss Marple requested a reenactment. Tommy, reluctant but proud to be useful, was positioned in the churchyard with his reel. Craddock stood inside, window ajar, Miss Marple. Now, Tommy, cast your line as you did yesterday. The boy swung the reel. The string arced, passed through the gap, and landed with a soft thud on the stage. Miss Marple. And if we attach a paper clip to the end, thus. She bent a clip into a hook and tipped the diamond onto a postcard slid beneath the case. She mimed the action. The postcard slid. The imaginary diamond followed. Craddock. But the case was locked, Miss Marple. The door was left ajar a finger's breadth. Mrs. Bantry mentioned the lock was stiff. A thread through the keyhole weighted could lift the diamond over the gap. She threaded Tommy's string through the keyhole, looped it around a cotton reel and pulled. The reel rolled across the velvet, mimicking the diamond's path. The suspects stared, transfixed. Lady Cheveley, who had been dozing in the mayor's chair, woke with a start. Then where is my diamond now, Miss Marple? Somewhere between the hall and the churchyard, buried in snow or hidden by the thief until the hue and cry dies down. Craddock organized a search party. Men with pokers and umbrellas probed the drifts. Children were enlisted to crawl beneath bushes. By noon they had found, at 1 o'clock, exhausted, they reconvened in the hall. The fire had burned low. The rock cakes were gone. Miss Marple stood before the empty case, lens in hand. Miss Marple. We have the how. The who remains. 5 people, 5 motives, 1 thread connecting them. Captain Haynes needs money. Miss Price guards a secret. Mr. Swettenham covets beauty he cannot afford. Mrs. Blackett shields her nephew. Tommy flies kites. She paused. Miss Marple. But only one of them watched the kite yesterday and knew the wind would carry it over the roof. Tommy's eyes widened. I told everyone, miss, in the post office queue. Mrs. Blackett stiffened. The clock struck 1. Outside, the sky darkened again. More snow threatened. Miss Marple closed her lens with a snap. Miss Marple. The thief is clever, but cleverness leaves traces lighter than footprints, and I have seen enough traces for one morning. She returned to her seat, took up her knitting, and began a new row. Click, 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 click. The net was drawing tight. Chapter 4. The Organist's Alibi. By 2 o'clock, the hall had settled into a brittle truce. The search parties had returned empty-handed. The snow had begun again, soft and deliberate, erasing every probe mark. Constable Polk brewed a fresh pot of tea the color of mahogany. The suspects sat in a loose semicircle, each nursing a chipped cup as though it were a shield. Inspector Craddock paced the stage, boots ringing on the boards. Mr. Swettenham, you claim uninterrupted presence in the choir loft from 7:50 until the alarm. The choir corroborates the music, yet the piece lasted 6 minutes. 11 minutes remain. Mr. Swettenham adjusted his pince-nez with the precision of a man aligning a rifle sight. I played the introduction, the verse, and the refrain. The choir sang. I then tidied my music. Swettenham, prim. One must respect the score, Inspector. Pages flutter in the draft. Miss Marple, seated beneath the loft, had been timing the exchange against her watch. She now rose and climbed the narrow staircase to the organ console. The loft smelled of candle wax and old hymnals. The organ bench bore the faint imprint of a narrow backside. On the floor lay a single diamond-shaped sequin, identical to those on Felicity Price's shawl. She lifted it between thumb and forefinger. Mr. Swettenham, did Miss Price's shawl keep you warm? Swettenham flushed to the roots of his thinning hair. She lent it, briefly. The loft is perishing. Miss Marple. Yet the sequin is here, and another was found below. Curious migration. She examined the pedalboard. The brass pedals were cold, but the dust upon them had been disturbed in 2 places, the swell pedal and the great C. Between them, a faint groove, as though a thread had been drawn across. Downstairs, Felicity Price twisted her handkerchief into a rope. I gave him the shawl at 7:40. He returned it at 8:10. I was distracted. Felicity, voice trembling. A letter from London. It arrived yesterday. She produced an envelope from her handbag. Cheap blue paper, London postmark. Craddock slid it open. Inside, a single line in pencil. Saturday. The usual place. Burn this. Felicity's eyes filled. He's married, but he promised. Miss Marple descended the stairs. Love makes accomplices of us all, my dear. Did Mr. Swettenham ask you to create a diversion? Swettenham, indignant. I needed no diversion, I was playing. Miss Marple turned to the organist. Then let us hear it again, exactly as you played last night. Swettenham hesitated, then mounted the loft. The organ wheezed into life. The carol filled the hall, 6 minutes precisely. When the final chord died, the silence was absolute. Miss Marple. Thank you. And now the 11 minutes. Swettenham. I rested. The pedals tire the ankles. Craddock's eyes narrowed. We'll test that. He summoned Tommy Pierce. Boy, sit at the pedals, play the bass line. Tommy, awed, obeyed. His short legs barely reached, but he managed a creditable thump. After 6 minutes, he was panting. Miss Marple. Mr. Swettenham is taller, yet even he would tire, and tired men lean. She pointed to the loft rail. A faint smudge of sequin dust marred the wood, exactly at the height where a man might rest his hands while peering down. Craddock. You watched the case from above. Swettenham. I glanced, naturally. The diamond was magnificent. Miss Marple. And you saw the kite string enter through the high window? Swettenham's pince-nez slipped. I saw something red, a trick of the light. Downstairs, Captain Haynes laughed, a short, bitter bark. Trick of the light, eh? Like the trick that'll see me in the workhouse? The atmosphere crackled. Miss Marple raised a placatory hand. Miss Marple. We are all tired. Let us examine the physical evidence. She produced the postcard slide found in the snow. On its reverse, a WI poster for the fete dated 1947. The cardboard was stiff, cut with "Twa pinking shears," standard issue from the village school. Miss Marple. Miss Price, do you recognize the scissors? Felicity nodded miserably. They're mine, from the classroom. Craddock. So the thief had access to the school. Swettenham. Half the village does. The brownies meet there. Miss Marple. You prepared this, Mr. Swettenham? Swettenham. For the notice board. It must have blown away. Miss Marple. Or been repurposed. A postcard makes an excellent slide for a diamond. She placed it on the velvet cushion, mimed the thread's pull. The card slid smoothly. The organist's hands clenched. This is conjecture, Miss Marple. Then let us test it fully. She requested the high window be opened. Tommy's remaining kite string was threaded through, weighted with a paperclip. From the loft, Swettenham was made to watch. Miss Marple. At 7:52 you began the carol. At 7:58 you stopped, allegedly to tidy. In fact, you saw the string enter, guided it to the case, and drew the diamond out. Swettenham. Impossible, I was playing. Miss Marple. The organ has a sostenuto pedal, one press, and the chord sustains. You pressed it, left the bench, performed the theft, returned before the sound died. She demonstrated. The chord rang out, lingered, faded. 11 minutes exactly. Swettenham's face crumpled. I only meant to look. The string caught the diamond. It slid. I panicked. Craddock. Where is it now? Swettenham. I hid it in the organ pipes, the great C wrapped in felt. Paul climbed the loft, reached into the pipe. His hand emerged, clutching a silk pouch. Inside, the St. Mary Mead diamond, cold and perfect. Lady Cheveley swooned. Felicity Price burst into tears. Captain Haynes lit another cigarette with shaking fingers. Miss Marple closed her lens. Miss Marple. Panic is a poor custodian, Mr. Swetnam. The diamond is safe and your conscience may rest. Swetnam was led away, muttering about frostbite and misplaced loyalty. The hall exhaled. Outside, the snow fell thicker than ever. Chapter 5. The Captain's Chickens. The diamond's recovery should have ended the affair. Instead, it cracked the case wider. By 4 o'clock, the hall had emptied of villagers. Only the principals remained snowbound and restless. Lady Cheveley had retired to Gossington Hall under protest, the stone locked in Craddock's briefcase. Mr. Swetnam sat handcuffed to a chair in the vestry, pale but composed, insisting he had acted alone. Miss Marple, however, was not convinced. She stood at the stage door, gazing at the churchyard where the kite-string groove had already filled with fresh snow. Miss Marple, softly to Craddock. A man who panics does not plan. The postcard was cut before the fete. The string was waxed in advance. Mr. Swetnam improvised the hiding place, but the theft was rehearsed. Craddock. Then we have an accomplice, Miss Marple, or a puppet master. She turned to Captain Haynes, who lounged against the piano, lighting his 10th cigarette since luncheon. Miss Marple. Captain, you were closest to the stage at 7:40. You saw the string enter? Haynes, exhaling. Saw a flash of red, thought it was a child's balloon, didn't connect it till now. Miss Marple. Yet you provided the silk. Your scarf matches the kite string. Haynes. Coincidence. RAF issue. Craddock. We'll search your farm, Captain, with or without permission. Haynes shrugged. Be my guest. Mind the foxes. At 5, under a sky the color of pewter, Craddock's little convoy, 2 constables, Miss Marple, and a reluctant Haynes, tramped the half-mile to Haynes's small holding. The snow was knee-deep. The captain's galoshes left erratic prints as though he dragged one foot. The farm was a sorry sight, a sagging barn, a coop of molting hens, a sign reading, Haynes's prize poultry, eggs daily, half buried in drift. Inside the barn, the air was warm with animal breath and desperation. Paulk's torch swept the rafters. Pawn tickets fluttered from a nail, all dated within the month. Haynes bitter, borrowed, meant to redeem them. The hens won't lay, the feed's rationed, the bank manager's a vulture. Miss Marple moved to the workbench. Amidst the clutter lay a reel of scarlet kite string, full, untouched. Beside it a pair of pinking shears, school issue, initials FP scratched on the handle. Miss Marple. Miss Price's scissors. Left here yesterday? Haynes. Felicity brought them. Said the children needed them for paper chains. Forgot to take them back. Craddock. Convenient. In the corner stood a child's kite. Red silk tail, bamboo frame. The tail had been shortened by exactly the length missing from Tommy's reel. Miss Marple. You flew this yesterday morning, Captain? Haynes. Tommy did. I watched. Boy's got a good arm. She examined the tail. The silk was frayed where it had been cut. The ends matched the fragments from the keyhole. Miss Marple. You gave Tommy the silk. You taught him the cast that would carry over the hall roof. Haynes. Teaching a lad to fly a kite isn't a crime. Craddock. Planning a theft with it is. Haynes's bravado cracked. Look, I needed the money. 20,000 would clear every debt and buy a proper flock. But I never touched the diamond. Swetnam did that. Miss Marple. Yet you knew the plan. You provided materials. You distracted the crowd with your gallant attentions to Miss Price. Felicity, summoned by telephone, the lines briefly restored, arrived flushed and furious. Reggie promised me nothing. He said the diamond would fund our elopement. She stopped, hand to mouth. Craddock. Elopement? Felicity, tears. He said his debts were a misunderstanding. That once free of them, Haynes. Said a lot of things, Fliss. Desperation loosens the tongue. Miss Marple lifted the kite. Beneath the silk tail, stitched into the bamboo, was a tiny pocket. Inside, a folded scrap of paper. She read aloud. Stage door bolt at 7:58. Card slide ready, pull steady. S. Miss Marple. S for Swetnam. You wrote this, Captain? Haynes. He asked me to, said it was a choir prank. Moving the diamond to tease Mrs. Bantry, I believed him. Craddock. You expect us to swallow that? Miss Marple. Belief is a luxury, Inspector. Evidence is not. She turned the kite over. On the reverse, in pencil. If caught, say nothing. I'll handle it. R.H. Haynes stared at his own handwriting as though it belonged to a stranger. Back at the hall, Swetnam was confronted with the kite, his composure shattered. Swetnam. Haynes was to take the blame if anything went wrong. He's desperate. I'm merely artistic. The diamond belongs in a cathedral, not a glass box. Craddock. You'll both see the inside of a court. Miss Marple shook her head. 2 men, 2 motives, greed and vanity. Yet the diamond was hidden in the organ, not pawned or fled with. Something interrupted the plan. She looked toward the vestry door where Tommy Pierce hovered, eyes wide. Miss Marple. Tommy, did you see anyone near the organ after the theft? Tommy. Only old Mrs. Harmon, miss. She was locking up the vestry, said she heard a noise like a mouse in the pipes. Miss Marple's gaze sharpened. Miss Marple. Mrs. Harmon, the rector's housekeeper. She has a key to every door in the parish. The snow had stopped. The sky cleared to a hard, starlit blue. Craddock. We'll question her at dawn. Chapter 6. Postmistress and nephew. Night had folded the village in indigo velvet. The hall's gas lamps hissed low, the fire was ash. Craddock had sent the constables to their beats, keeping only Polk on watch. Swetnam and Haynes dozed in opposite corners, wrists cuffed to chair legs. Felicity Price had been taken home by her landlady, weeping. Tommy Pierce slept curled beneath a pew like a dormitory mouse. Miss Marple alone remained awake, knitting by candlelight. The booty was nearly finished, only the ribbon remained. She laid it aside at 11:30 and slipped out the side door. The post office stood dark across the green, its pillar box wearing a snowy nightcap. Mrs. Dora Blackett lived above the shop. A single lamp burned behind lace curtains. Miss Marple tapped the brass knocker shaped like a lion. Mrs. Blackett, opening a crack. Who's there at this hour? Miss Marple. Only an old woman seeking warmth, Dora. And answers. The door widened. The postmistress wore a flannel dressing gown and an expression of fortified innocence. Mrs. Blackett. You'll catch your death. Come in, but mind the step. The parlor smelled of violet caches and sealing wax. A coal fire glowed. The counterbell glinted. On the table lay a half-sorted pile of Christmas post, letters franked, parcels tied with string. Miss Marple, your nephew Sidney. He never reached Birmingham. Mrs. Blackett, stiffening. Sidney's no concern of yours, Miss Marple. He arrived at 4:30. The last bus left at 5:15, cancelled by snow, yet he vanished at 8:30. Where? Mrs. Blackett poured tea with deliberate calm. He walked to Much Benham, said he'd thumb a lorry. Miss Marple. In a blizzard? With burglar's tools in his pocket? She produced from her handbag a small jemmy, found by Polk in the barn rubbish. Initials SB scratched on the handle. Mrs. Blackett. That's not Sidney's. Miss Marple. It matches the pry marks on Captain Haynes's chicken coop, where the kite was stored. The postmistress's cup rattled in its saucer. Mrs. Blackett. Sidney's reformed. He came to help with the fate parcels. Miss Marple. Then why hide in the post office loft? She pointed upward. A trapdoor in the ceiling stood ajar. A ladder leaned against the wall. Mrs. Blackett's face crumpled. He was afraid. After Dartmoor, every policeman's eye feels like a searchlight. Miss Marple climbed the ladder with surprising agility. The loft was a treasure trove of village secrets, undelivered letters, ration books, a box labeled "Returned to Sender." In the corner lay a bundle wrapped in oilcloth. She unwrapped it. Inside, a child's kite reel, empty, scarlet string replaced by picture cord. Beside it, a glass cutter's wheel and a suction cup. Miss Marple, calling down. Sydney planned a different theft. The kite was a rehearsal. Footsteps on the stairs. Sydney Blackett, thin, sharp-featured, eyes darting, appeared in the hatch. Sydney. Keep your voice down, Auntie. I never meant harm. Miss Marple. You meant the diamond. You watched Tommy fly the kite, saw the string reach the hall roof, and improved the design. Sydney. Clever, eh? Glass cutter on a string, pop the pane, suction the stone, reel it in like a trout. Snow covers everything, Mrs. Blackett. But you never used it, Sydney. Couldn't. Swetnam beat me to it. I saw the string go in at 7:50, thought it was mine gone astray. Hid up here till the coast cleared, Miss Marple. And Mrs. Harmon saw you? Sydney. Old Bat nearly caught me descending. I scarpered out the back. Downstairs the bell jingled. Craddock entered, snow on his shoulders. Craddock. Miss Marple. Pawk said you'd gone for a walk. What the devil? Miss Marple. Meet the third thief, Inspector. He planned but did not execute. Sydney was cuffed and led away. Mrs. Blackett followed, protesting loyalty. Back at the hall, Dawn was a pale rumor. Craddock rubbed exhausted eyes. Craddock. 3 thieves, 3 plans, 1 diamond. Swetnam's panic hiding. Haynes's desperation, Blackett's cunning. Yet, the stone was in the organ pipes. Miss Marple. Exactly. Someone moved it after Swetnam hid it. Someone with access to both hall and church. She produced the diamond-shaped sequin from her pocket, the one found near the font. Miss Marple. Mrs. Harmon locked the vestry at 8:15. She heard a mouse in the pipes. Mice do not wear sequins. Craddock. The rector's housekeeper. Miss Marple. Who better? She dusts the organ daily, knows every creak. She saw Swetnam hide the diamond, waited till the hall emptied, transferred it to the font for safekeeping or ransom. She opened her handbag. Inside lay the diamond wrapped in a choir boy's surplice. Craddock. You took it, Miss Marple. Borrowed. Mrs. Harmon left it in the font, intending collection tomorrow, I anticipated. She told how she had slipped into the church at midnight, found the stone beneath the linen, and replaced it with a paste copy from Lady Cheveley's costume jewels. Miss Marple. Mrs. Harmon believes diamonds are unlucky. Her sister died wearing one. She meant to purify it in holy water before returning it anonymously. Craddock. Superstition, not theft, Miss Marple. Fear is the greatest thief. It stole her reason. At 7, Mrs. Harmon was brought from the rectory, gray-haired, trembling, clutching a prayer book. Mrs. Harmon. I only wanted to save souls from vanity. The stone gleamed like the devil's eye. The paste diamond lay in her apron pocket. She had discovered the switch at Matins, fainted in the vestry. Craddock. Obstruction, madam. You'll answer for it. Miss Marple placed the real diamond in his hand. Chapter 7. The kite string solution. 7:30 on the second morning. The hall had become a ship adrift. Chairs askew, paper chains sagging, the air stale with tea and sleeplessness. Swetnam and Haynes were gone, lodged overnight in much Benham cells. Sydney Blackett had been collected by county police at dawn. Mrs. Harmon sat in the vestry, rosary clicking, awaiting the magistrate. Only Miss Marple, Inspector Craddock, Constable Polk, and a shivering Tommy Pierce remained. The diamond, real this time, rested in Craddock's pocket, wrapped in evidence tape. Craddock rubbed red-rimmed eyes. 4 confessions, 4 stories, 1 stone. I'm for Bedlam, Miss Marple. serene. Then let us tie the threads before they tangle further. She requested the stage be cleared. Pock swept mince pie crumbs into a dustpan. Tommy righted the glass case. Miss Marple produced Tommy's kite reel, now nearly empty, and the scarlet silk scarf confiscated from Haynes. Miss Marple. Observe, Inspector, a demonstration. She opened the high window. Snowflakes danced in. Tommy on the stage held the reel. Miss Marple. At 7:52 yesterday, Mr. Swetnam began the carol. At the same moment, Sidney Blackett, watching from the churchyard, cast his improved kite. String through this gap. Tommy swung the reel. The silk arced, passed through the window, and landed with a soft thud on the velvet cushion. Miss Marple. But Sidney's plan required a glass cutter. He never attached it. Instead, Captain Haynes, stationed below, saw the string, recognized opportunity, and acted. She threaded the silk through the keyhole, looped it around a bent paperclip. Miss Marple. The case door was left ajar a finger's breadth, Mrs. Bantry's stiff lock. Haynes tipped the diamond onto the postcard slide prepared by Felicity Price. She slid the postcard beneath the imaginary stone. A gentle tug, the card glided outward. Miss Marple. Swetnam in the loft sustained the cord with the sostenuto pedal, descended, guided the string, and drew the diamond up to the loft rail. Tommy pulled. The postcard rose, caught on the rail exactly where sequin dust had been found. Craddock. Then why hide it in the pipes? Miss Marple. Panic. He heard Mrs. Harmon locking the vestry below. He stuffed the diamond into the great sea pipe, meaning to retrieve it later. She opened the organ bench. Inside lay a folded choirmaster's score, Swetnam's handwriting. Return diamond to font after matins, curse lifted, Miss Marple. Mrs. Harmon found it at 8:15, believed it a sign, and moved it to the baptismal font for purification. Craddock shook his head. A comedy of thieves, Miss Marple. A tragedy of motives. Greed, vanity, fear, superstition, each snatched the diamond in turn, none kept it. She turned to Tommy. And you, dear? Tommy, sheepish. I only flew the kite, miss, never knew it'd nick anything. Miss Marple. Innocence is the best red herring. She gathered the silk, the reel, the postcard, the sequin. Miss Marple. The kite string was the constant, scarlet thread through every plan. Sidney designed it, Haynes supplied it, Swetnam executed it, Mrs. Harmon sanctified it, a perfect chain. Craddock pocketed the evidence. Court will untangle the rest. Swetnam for theft, Haynes and Blackett for conspiracy, Harmon for obstruction, Miss Marple, and mercy for the boy who flew too high. Outside, the sun rose clear, turning the snow to diamond dust. The church bell rang for matins, Mrs. Harmon's usual hour. Craddock offered Miss Marple his arm. Walk you home? The roads are plowing, Miss Marple. In a moment, one last knot to tie. She climbed to the loft, opened the great sea pipe, and retrieved a final item. A tiny pasteboard tag reading property of St. Mary Mead Nursery, opening spring 1948. Miss Marple. Lady Cheveley's anonymous donation, the diamond's true destiny. She tucked it into Craddock's breast pocket beside the stone. Miss Marple. Let the nursery flourish and let the village forget its winter folly. Tommy carried the kite, now harmless bamboo and rags, out into the churchyard, launched it against the pale sky. The scarlet tail streamed, caught an updraft, and soared over the rooftops like a laugh set free. Miss Marple watched, smiling. Miss Marple. There. The string has found its proper element. The bell ceased. The snow sparkled. The mystery was solved, not by a single villain, but by a village full of human hearts, each pulling in its own direction until the truth snapped into place. Chapter 8. The Verger's Confession. 8 o'clock. The church of St. Mary Mead stood hushed, its nave lit only by the Advent candles and a shaft of winter sun that struck the altar like a blessing. Inspector Craddock had dismissed the constables. The hall was locked, the evidence boxed. Only Miss Marple, Craddock, and old Mr. Clement, the verger, remained. Mrs. Harmon had been taken to the rectory under gentle arrest. Swettenham, Haynes, and Sidney Blackett were en route to Much Benham. The diamond rested in Craddock's pocket, cold and heavy. Yet something nagged. Miss Marple stood before the baptismal font, an ancient marble bowl on a pedestal carved with cherubs. The water within was filmed with ice. A single sequin floated like a silver fish. Miss Marple, softly. "Mr. Clement, you locked the vestry at 8:15. You heard a mouse in the pipes. You saw Mrs. Harmon move the diamond. Why did you say nothing?" The verger stooped, 70th a day, face creased like old vellum, clutched his keyring. His voice trembled. "Clement, I thought it a prank. The choir boys are always hiding things. I meant to return it myself, quietly." Craddock. "You let 4 people confess?" Clement. "Panic spreads, sir, like measles." Miss Marple lifted the sequin. It was real diamond dust, flaked from the stone when Mrs. Harmon wrapped it in the surplice. "Miss Marple, you watched from the vestry door. You saw Swettenham hide it, saw Mrs. Harmon move it, saw me retrieve it at midnight. Yet you stayed silent." Clement's knees buckled. He sank onto a pew. Clement. "My daughter, sir, Inspector. She's in Switzerland, tuberculosis. The sanatorium costs £30 a month. Lady Cheveley promised a donation, but only if the diamond was safe. I thought, if I found it first." His voice cracked. Clement. "I hid in the font's pedestal. There's a hollow for the heating pipe. I meant to slip the stone into the collection plate Sunday. Anonymous. For my girl." Craddock's face softened. "You obstructed justice, Miss Marple, and nearly condemned innocence, but despair is a heavy master." She opened the font's pedestal. Inside, a small tin box labeled Altar Guild Candles. Within lay a folded note in Clement's spidery hand. "Forgive me. The diamond is God's, not man's. Use it for the children. A sinner, Miss Marple. You wrote this after I took the stone. You replaced it with the paste copy from the rectory's Christmas pageant." Clement nodded, tears cutting channels through the dust on his cheeks. Craddock. "You'll face charges, Mr. Clement, but I'll speak for leniency." The verger was led away, slowly without cuffs. The church door closed with a gentle thud. Miss Marple stood alone in the nave. Sunlight caught the diamond in Craddock's hand, scattering prisms across the stone floor. Miss Marple. 5 souls, Inspector, 5 motives: greed, vanity, fear, superstition, love. Each touched the diamond, none kept it. The village itself was the thief, stealing its own peace for one winter night. Craddock. "And the kite, Miss Marple? A child's toy, the perfect misdirection." She walked the aisle, pausing at each confessional point. The organ loft, Swettenham's vanity. The stage, Haynes's desperation. The churchyard, Sidney's cunning. The font, Mrs. Harmon's fear. The pedestal, Clement's love. Miss Marple. "Human nature, Inspector, like stained glass, beautiful in fragments, whole only when light shines through." Outside, Tommy Pierce waited with his kite, now mended with blue ribbon. Tommy. "For the nursery, miss. Lady Cheveley said they'll hang it in the window." Miss Marple smiled. A fitting epilogue. Craddock locked the church. The snow had melted into slush. The green steamed gently. Craddock. "Court next week. They'll all plead guilty, save the village, the scandal." Miss Marple. "And the diamond?" Craddock. "Sold anonymously. Proceeds to the nursery. Lady Cheveley insists." They walked the path to Miss Marple's cottage. Smoke curled from chimneys. Children sledded on the green. Miss Marple. St. Mary Mead will gossip for a month, then forget. That is the mercy of small places. At her gate, she paused. Miss Marple. One last thing, Inspector, the red silk. Burn it. Let the kite fly clean. Craddock handed her the scarf. She tucked it into her pocket. Miss Marple. Symbols matter. Let the village remember the diamond, not the thread. She entered her cottage. The door closed. Chapter 9. Confrontation in the snow. 10 o'clock. The green lay silvered under a full moon, every footprint from the past 2 days erased by a final, gentle fall. The village hall stood dark, its doors padlocked by Craddock's order. Only the church windows glowed, soft amber from the vestry where the last act would play. Miss Marple had requested one final gathering. Not for justice, she told Craddock, but for truth. Let the village see its own reflection. Word spread like spilled milk. By 10:15 the church was full. Mrs. Bantry in her furs, Lady Cheveley enthroned in the front pew. Felicity Price clutching a handkerchief, Captain Haynes unshaven but upright, Mr. Swetnam pale in borrowed cuffs, Sidney Blackett flanked by constables, Mrs. Harmon veiled in black, Mr. Clement supported by the rector. Tommy Pierce stood at the font, kite in hand, eyes wide as saucers. Miss Marple entered. Last, coat unbuttoned, cheeks pink from the cold. She carried no notes, only her knitting bag. She took the pulpit steps slowly, placed the bag on the lectern, and faced the congregation. Miss Marple. We are here not to accuse, but to understand. A diamond vanished. 5 hearts touched it, none kept it. Let us walk the path together. She began with the kite. Miss Marple. Tommy flew it on Friday. The wind carried it over the hall roof. Sidney Blackett saw and planned a glass cutter on a string. But snow sealed the roads. He hid in the post office loft. Sidney nodded, shamefaced. Miss Marple. Captain Haynes saw the same flight. Debts gnawed him. He cut silk from his scarf, gave it to Tommy as extra tail. He prepared the postcard slide with Miss Price's scissors. Haynes met her gaze, steady now. I thought it a loan against my future, Miss Marple. Miss Price cut the card, believing it for paper chains. Her heart was elsewhere, tangled in London letters. Felicity wept silently. Miss Marple. Mr. Swetnam watched from the loft. The carol gave cover. He sustained the cord, descended, drew the diamond up on Haynes's string, and hid it in the organ pipe, meaning to sell it for beauty's sake. Swetnam's head bowed. Miss Marple. Mrs. Harmon heard the pipe rattle. Fearful of curses, she lost a sister to a jewel. She moved the stone to the font for purification. Mrs. Harmon clutched her rosary. Miss Marple. Mr. Clement saw all. Love for his sick daughter silenced him. He planned to slip the diamond into the collection plate. Clement's tears fell onto the prayer book. Miss Marple. 5 plans, 1 stone, no malice, only human frailty. She opened her knitting bag. Inside lay the diamond, real, cold, brilliant. Gasps. Miss Marple. Inspector Craddock holds the paste copy. This is Lady Cheveley's, returned untouched. She placed it on the velvet cushion from the hall, brought for the occasion. Miss Marple. The theft was a mirror. We saw greed, vanity, fear, love, and recognized ourselves. Lady Cheveley rose. I lent the stone for the nursery. Let it stay for the nursery. Sell it. Build the children a future. A murmur of assent. Craddock. Charges stand. Conspiracy, obstruction, but sentences will reflect intent. Community service, perhaps. The village repays itself. Miss Marple descended the pulpit. She stopped before each culprit. To Sidney. Honesty is lighter than any jewel. To Haynes. Debts are chains. Truth cuts them. To Swetnam. Beauty belongs to all, not one. To Mrs. Harmon. Superstition blinds. Faith opens eyes. To Clement, love finds a way, silence never does. Finally to Tommy, fly your kite high, dear, but keep it tethered to the ground. She returned to the font. The sequin floated, caught the candlelight, sank. Miss Marple, the snow has fallen. The traces are gone. Let the village remember the light, not the shadow. She took the kite from Tommy, cut the scarlet string with her embroidery scissors, and tied on blue ribbon from her bag. Miss Marple, blue for hope. The congregation filed out into the moonlight. Haynes offered Felicity his arm. She took it. Swetnam helped Mrs. Harmon down the steps. Clement walked with the rector head high. Sidney shook Craddock's hand. Miss Marple lingered. She placed the diamond in Lady Cheveley's gloved palm. Lady Cheveley, you've given us more than the stone, Miss Marple. You've given us back ourselves. Miss Marple, we never lost ourselves, only mislaid the map. Outside, Tommy launched the kite. The blue tail streamed against the stars, soaring higher than the church spire. The village watched, breathless. Chapter 10. Morning tea and mince pies. The following morning, St. Mary Mead woke to a world rinsed clean. The snow had settled into gentle hillocks. The sun struck sparks from every icicle. Smoke rose straight from every chimney, and the church bell rang a cheerful 9 for matins. Miss Marple's cottage, Danemead, halfway down the lane, glowed like a Christmas card. Holly framed the door, a robin perched on the gatepost. Inside, the fire crackled, the kettle sang, and the table was laid for 7. Bone china cups, a 3-tiered stand of scones, and a plate of mince pies still warm from the oven. The guests arrived in 2s and 3s, stamping snow from their boots. First came Captain Haynes and Felicity Price, arm in arm, cheeks pink from more than cold. Haynes sheepish. Morning, Miss Marple. Thought we'd walk Miss Price home. Via your scones, if we may. Felicity smiling. Reggie's selling the farm. We're opening a flying school, kites for children, lessons for grown-ups afraid of heights. Next, Mr. Swetnam carrying a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Swetnam. I've resigned the organ, taking pupils instead. Music should be shared, not hoarded. The parcel contained a silver thimble, engraved for the W.I., with apologies. Mrs. Harmon arrived with the rector clutching a basket of damson jam. Mrs. Harmon, for the nursery bazaar, and I'm knitting booties. Superstition's a poor companion. Mr. Clement followed, leaning on his daughter's arm. She had arrived by the early train, pale but smiling, a scarf around her throat. Clement. The sanatoriums waived the fees, said the village collection covered it. Anonymous, they said. His eyes met Miss Marple's. She inclined her head, serene. Last came Tommy Pierce, kite under one arm, a paper crown from the nursery pageant on his head. Tommy. They made me king of the snow, look. He produced a blue ribbon, first prize in the kite-flying contest held at dawn on the green. Miss Marple ushered them to the table. Miss Marple. Sit, sit. Tea first, confessions never. She poured Earl Grey, weak for Mrs. Harmon, strong for Haynes. The scones were split buttered, jammed. The mince pies vanished 2 at a time. Conversation flowed like the tea. Haynes. Court was lenient. 6 months community service, painting the village hall. Felicity supervising. Felicity laughing. He's terrible with a brush, but excellent with heights. Swetnam. I'm composing a fate anthem. The Diamond Waltz proceeds to the nursery. Mrs. Harmon. I've taken to dusting the organ pipes myself, no more mice. Clement. And I've a new key ring. Only honest keys. Tommy, mouth full, mumbled, Can we fly the kite after? Miss Marple. After the washing up, dear. She rose, opened the curtains. Outside, children were already gathering on the green, kites of every color bobbing like balloons. A banner fluttered. St. Mary Mead Nursery, opening spring 1948, funded by kindness. Miss Marple. The diamond sold for $22,000. Lady Cheveley added a 0 for goodwill. The nursery will have a kite garden, a music room, and a font for christenings. Mrs. Harmon's design. Laughter rippled. Swetnam. And a plaque. In memory of a winter folly. Miss Marple. No names. Let the lesson be gentle. She produced her knitting, the booty now paired, ribboned in blue. Miss Marple. For the first nursery baby. May its path be straighter than ours. Haynes raised his cup. To Miss Marple, who untangled us without cutting the string. All. To Miss Marple. Outside, the church clock struck 10. The kite flyers cheered as Tommy's blue-ribboned kite soared highest, tail streaming like a comet. Miss Marple watched from the window, eyes bright. Miss Marple, softly. Human nature is like knitting, you see. One dropped stitch and the scarf unravels, but pick it up, weave it in, and the pattern holds. The fire settled. The teapot was empty. The guests departed in a flurry of thanks and promises. Flying lessons, music recitals, jam deliveries. Miss Marple closed the door. The cottage was quiet again, save for the tick of the grandfather clock and the soft click of her needles beginning a new row. She opened her diary, wrote in her neat hand. December 1947, the Snowstorm Horror. 5 hearts, 1 stone, no villains, only villagers. The kite flies on. The village knits itself whole. She closed the book, set it beside the fire, and poured herself the last cup of tea. Outside, the kites danced against a sky the color of hope.